All right, I would point folks to section 5 in the budget for finance. Director Jones, thank you for your patience with us as we ran a little late in the morning. We appreciate it. I know folks are just on their way back from powdering up in the office or whatever people do. So while folks get settled, would you mind starting with introductions of you and your team?
Thank you. Thank you for having us. So to my right is Kathy Havens. She's the Deputy Director of Finance and the Director of Accounting. In the second row is Sharika Jackson, City Treasurer. Jennifer Cruz, Deputy City Treasurer. In the third row is Timothy Howard, Director of Purchasing. Shamika Davis, Assistant Director of Purchasing. Tim Hurley, Assistant Director of Accounting. In the fourth row is Dr. Leslie Smith, Executive Director of TVA. Shandon Jackson, Assistant Director of TVA. Enza Minio, City Assessor. In the fifth row is Sarah Nowak, Director of Parking. Jackie Rodriguez, Assistant Director of Parking.
Thank you. Do you have any introductory remarks for us?
No introductory remarks. Just thank you for allowing us to discuss our budget.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here and for the work you put into this budget. We will go this section. We'll try to go section by section. So we'll start with the Director's Office, which is on page 3. Maybe let's do Director's Office and Accounting together. Page 3 and page 3 through 7. And I'll open it up to anyone who has any first questions. Maybe while people get settled, I'll ask a question just to get the ball rolling here. So a couple months ago, we passed legislation to you were contracting with a third party to help with some of the receivables. Just want to see how things are going there, if we've gotten that work off the ground, and how receivables look generally.
So are you referring to the all New York process servers for foreclosure processing?
No, remember it was a third party that helps to do the collectibles for the kind of the hardest to reach. Remember?
So that the only one I recall is the all New York process servers, and that was back, I believe, in August.
Okay.
And that was regarding foreclosure outreach.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm sorry. That's right.
You're referencing?
Yeah. So how are things going with that?
Okay, so it's a little too early to really gauge the impact, but I will let Sharika Jackson, the city treasurer, discuss that in general.
Thank you for that question, council member. Yeah, it's a little too early to have a year-over-year comparison because we just had them do activities with us.
Sorry, into the mic, pretty please.
Is that good? Can you hear me now?
I'll let these folks tell us.
What about now?
I can hear you okay. It's mostly for YouTube's sake.
Is that good? What about now?
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, council member, for that question. It's a little too early, like Director Jones said, because all New York process servers just started with us in the activities of helping us get the final notices out to get folks' attention and getting contact information for skip tracing. However, it does look like preliminarily that the end of foreclosure went a lot smoother because we were able to intervene with taxpayers before they got to the point of auction. So the number of properties was lower. The number of cancellations was a lot lower than prior years. So preliminarily, it looks good, but we should have a better gauge at the end of the current action to do a full comparison.
Okay. Thank you for that. And well, I guess that's all the way into Treasury, so I should follow my own my own rules, or maybe just expand them a bit and say we'll talk about that. We're talking right now, for those who just joined, director's office, accounting, and treasury. So it's the first 3 sections within finance. It goes all the way up until, let's stop at page 10 in assessment, and we'll ask questions there. Just generally speaking, how are we feeling about any major changes to receivables? I'm assuming that when we, even though it's a fairly small tax impact, as the mayor and the OMB director shared earlier, I'm assuming there typically tends to be some kind of challenges for finance when there is an increase in the levy at all. Are you prepared for any such challenges?
No, I think we're pretty much prepared. We have, all the resources that we need. We have a fabulous collection team. We have the new relationship with the All New York process servers. We work closely with the law department, and I think the outreach it'll be just fine this year.
Okay, great. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Chair Gruber. I just want to clarify. Did you say we are on assessment or?
No, we're going until assessment. So
okay, I'll yield.
5-1 to 5-10.
I'll yield.
Okay. Councilmember Leslie Smith.
I have questions, but I'm not sure they're in your order.
What are they regarding?
Really parking enforcement.
We'll get there in
Got
a
it.
little bit. President Melendez, any questions for the beginning 3 sections of finance? Anyone on this side? Councilmember Martin.
On page 1, first of all, thank you, Director Jones, for all the incredible work you and your department does. I just have one question around the bus camera arm program, and I have a few metrics that I'm going to ask for in writing.
We'll actually get there shortly when we get to traffic violations. We're just on accounting, assessment, and treasury for right now.
Sorry, you said page 1 through 10.
Well, one's just the overview, yeah.
Right,
so
but you said page 1 to 10. That's why I asked.
I understand the nuance here. Director's office, accounting, and treasury is what we're talking about right now. Anyone over there, any questions about any of those 3 sections? No? Okay. Then we will move over to assessment, which is starting on page 11, and I'll turn it to Vice President Harris.
Thank you, Chair Gruber. I'd like to have us, and by the way, thank you, Commissioner, for all the work that you and your team do over the years and this upcoming budget and preparation. I'd like to direct us to page 12. I'm looking at the KPIs where it has number 1, where it's budgeted for $10,000 2025, and then this year projected allocation is $8,000. And if you can explain to me what was the difference? Why was there a difference or a change?
That's a typographical error.
So it would be 10,000?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, regarding the assessments, last year there was a huge attempt, and actually a successful attempt, to educate our seniors on how the assessment process is rolled out. Your team did an amazing job of turning things around so we can get people educated when we had that whole pause campaign come through. Can you tell me more about how you continue that education this year and how you're going to address the basics, STAR, enhanced, and senior citizen disability exemptions for fiscal year 27?
Yes. Thank you for that question. So we do continue to do outreach in the various quadrants. I am going to ask Enza Minio, the city assessor, to speak more to our efforts.
Okay, thank you for that question. So yes, we were very successful in our pop-up workshops. So this year, what we're planning on doing this summer is working in all 4 quadrants. We are right now in the process of facilitating where we're going to hold those, what accommodations are available. I'm planning on, don't want to get too much into details, but we're planning on having these workshops at each one of the quadrants, probably once a week, and that'll be accompanied with an appraiser and a clerk, and that'll address all the questions of new applicants and existing. I understand there's a lot of problems with the STAR, with the state, so hopefully we're going to be able to address all those, and I'd like to keep this going every year in the summer months to have this, this workshop going. We did also partner with communications, and they're going to help us get the word out as to where we're going to be, and get the word out to where they can find us, and hopefully we can get more people involved.
Thank you. So in this budget, projected budget here that we have here, is there increases to that process, like, a dollar amount, or is that just the same as last year to that whole process?
I'm sorry. So we don't have any additional personnel
Okay.
associated with this particular budget for this year.
Okay.
We will use the existing staff.
That's great. That's great. You guys are able to still be able to provide that service, and with all the challenges that we've been dealing with. I'm looking forward to you guys coming to my quadrant, and I'd like to just make a small suggestion to see if you can get the state to come to the 4 quadrants so they can be of service to our citizens as they navigate the state allocations or the state exemptions. Let's see. And then I would like to know if you can talk a little bit more about the overall NWBE participation for this upcoming fiscal year, what your expectations are.
Okay, I will ask Director Howard to speak to that.
Thank you.
So we've moved to purchasing. Okay.
We're not at purchasing yet.
My apologies. I'll hold that.
Council, do you have further questions on assessment, Vice President Harris? President Melendez had an assessment question.
Yes, thank you. Can't believe it's been 2 years already since we did the last assessment. We're due in 2 more years, right? So my question is, my understanding is that the last time we did this, obviously we had a lot of conversations about the changes and what was going to happen. And at the end of it, my understanding is that we still were not at 100% of the value in the city. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Do you know what the percentage was, roughly? Or could we get it in writing?
I'll provide that to you in writing.
Great. More so for the public and just trying to understand the process in the off years when we don't do an assessment. If someone had a concern or believed that their value is not what it should be, is there a process in between the 4-year assessment process to challenge? And could you describe that for us? I know it's not a budget question, but it's related.
It's actually the same process as it would be in a reval year. I will ask Enza Minio, the city assessor, to explain the process.
Your mic on?
Okay, so the process is the same. The same process, we do an informal. So if they call in during the year, we open up a ticket and we call that an informal review. So it gives us a chance to get out there and fix the value before we get to grievance day. If they miss that informal portion or they don't like the value at the informal, the result of that, then they are able to file the grievance, and that is on March 17th. So that's the day of grievance every year. It's the third Tuesday in March. So that's when they get to do that, and they can argue their assessment or challenge their assessment annually, regardless of a reassessment year or not. That's always available to them.
Great, thank you. And I think the Vice President asked this, but I might ask it a different way. So last year in the budget, maybe it was 2 years ago, we added that position that was focused on making sure people understood what access they have to different types of programs, STAR exemptions, enhanced STAR, et cetera. Could we be provided some results of how that's been working and then maybe what the plan is for the coming year for those services?
Yes, we'll provide you that in writing.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing? If you go to the summary section, page 41, this is the calculation of the constitutional tax limit. there are equalization ratios. So these equalization ratios that are stated here are essentially where the state believes our assessed value lies currently.
Perfect. 41, you said?
Correct.
41 in summary.
In the summary section.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Leslie Smith, you had an assessment question?
Yes. I have a question around the star exemption as well. Do we have any data to determine how many residents or the value that could be attributed back to residents if they actually applied, were aware that they qualified for the senior exemption, the veteran exemption? Do we have any information around that, and can that be provided in writing?
That is actually also in the summary section.
Another question I have around the assessment. What education is being provided? I know that we talked about going into the quadrants and whatnot, but what we heard at many community meetings was that people were just very angry. There's an idea that with the assessment that some neighborhoods are paying an unfair rate and paying for other communities, which I don't believe is accurate. But then also education just around the value of your home increasing, particularly as it relates to closing the racial wealth gap. Is there additional education plan for community members to not only understand that part, but also understand how they can advocate to get it lowered if indeed they're just residents who are trying to age in place, do not have any increase in income to contribute to their property value?
So what we do plan to do is, work in the various quadrants to educate our citizens on the process. Also work with the clergy as well. Our goal is to try to kind of meet people where they are. And we're also working with our communications department to develop a marketing strategy, an information strategy, so that we can go out and educate the public on the process in general.
And also the Office of Financial Empowerment has launched Home Prosper, which will also be involved in this. We used the Office of Financial Empowerment last year. We had a big event over at, I believe it was UPrep over on Lake Avenue, in which we talked about home ownership, the value, what the assessment means. There were some folk from the city finance department that was there at that event. So there'll be a lot more of those coming up, because education is absolutely key in this, particularly as it relates to the value of your home and how that increases your net worth almost immediately. And also the education point of showing that a higher assessment does not necessarily mean higher taxes. As we saw with the last assessment, there were folks whose assessment went up and their taxes went down, or some folks whose assessments went up and their taxes went up, like mine. I deserved to have to pay more taxes. No one over on the 19th Ward should have been subsidizing my less taxes that I was paying. So those types of education components will be necessary again going forward. This year we're not going to be caught flat-footed, and we make sure that we'll be prepared in 2 years to really go full bore in starting the education. And a lot of that education will need to start next year, because the next scheduled assessment is for 2028. Although I feel still like we're still doing the other one.
Well, and just to piggyback on that, is there any anticipated increased FTEs to accommodate the additional education?
I think we should be good right now. I mean, if need be, we could possibly look at getting some temporary help for that. But right now, because of our last assessment and the strategy that the finance department put into place, we have, like, for example, a clerk now understands all of the process preserved in this budget that can help with that process. And you got Enza and team that can go around now, used to being all over the city. I got to know Enza very well 2 years ago. Mike Patterson along with her. But it was a good opportunity. We actually developed a calculation tool that IT developed with us, communications, IT, finance, where people were able to put in their information and see what their taxes were, what exemptions they might be qualified for. So we'll want to follow a similar process in the coming year.
How are we doing in terms of the migration off of the mainframe when it comes to all of the many moving pieces of the tax bill?
So we're working closely with the project management office. We do have a project schedule that we are attempting to adhere to. There are times when, things fall behind and we may need to modify the project schedule, but for the most part, we're on target working with the project management office, testing, various data elements within our tax system is beginning. We're starting that process. So we're at the very early stages of integration.
Do you think will it be complete this year, or it's a multi-year project?
The goal is for us to be in a stage where we're developed enough to attempt converting the system. We do intend to run parallel, so it's belt and suspenders. That's my motto. So because the tax system can't fail.
Yes,
we need to get the tax bill out the door. So
okay,
that's the plan, and it's progressing. Right now, it's progressing as planned.
Thanks. I had you and I spoke, Director Jones, about a constituent who was having some trouble. She was paying by check, and she was having some trouble. I'm assuming that that's not a one-time thing. That there's a number of residents who are still probably reluctant to pay through an escrow account or reluctant to pay online. What are we doing to figure out how to get these to help these folks make hopefully their life and your team's life easier by moving into one of those kinds of payments? Or are we just is the idea just let folks pay by check if that's what they want to do?
So, we don't put pressure on our citizens. I mean, they pay the way they feel comfortable paying. We do prefer the electronic payment method. We have a lockbox processing entity right now where if people do send their checks in, they go directly to the lockbox for processing. We do offer the automatic payment through Hamer Enterprises. Hamer has been a longtime partner of the cities. So those are as far as, automatic payments, that's the preferable option through Hamer Enterprises. And all that information is contained on the tax bill. It gives our citizens an opportunity to explore the various methods of payment.
But when someone does have an issue or challenge, I think in this case it was a person's check got lost in the mail, which is a real thing that happens, right? Is there a conversation afterwards to say, "Hey, sir or madam, here's a way for you to kind of expedite and have a more secure payment path"? Do people from your team do that kind of outreach, or is it just kind of laissez-faire, hands off, let people pay how they want to pay?
So it's not something that we're actively marketing different methods of payment, but if we do run into an individual that's used to writing a check and mailing it to us, and that check has been somehow lost in the mail or claimed to be lost in the mail, we do talk about the various methods of payment that would make it more expeditious for those taxpayers to get their payment into us.
Thanks. Any final questions on assessment or treasury or accounting? Or should we, Councilmember Patterson?
Not a question, just a comment. I just want to thank you and the entire team for your collaboration this last year on getting out and getting that information out into the community back in February. We had a really short clock to get that word out, and you guys met the mark, so thank you.
Okay, we're going to open up to the last three sections all at the same time. So that's parking municipal violations, purchasing, and the traffic violations agency. And if you're addressing Director Leslie Smith, let's make sure that we include that the title so that we know who we're talking to here. Councilor Patterson, did I see your hand shoot up? Then, you know what, for these last three sections, we can just start with the Vice President and everyone can get their bite of the apple. Vice President Harris.
Thank you, Chair Gruber. I'll go back to my question I was trying to ask earlier. To Commissioner Jones, what were the overall projected increase to the fiscal year 27 for NWBE participation?
Okay, I'm going to ask Director Howard to now respond to that question.
Good afternoon, council person. Thank you for that question. The projected MWBE participation for fiscal 27 is $30 million.
And is that a change or from last year, or that's pretty much the same? Was there any changes?
That is an increase up by $5 million.
Can you explain why you project that to be increased? Have we had more participation, a robust amount of participation in the last few years? Could you speak to that?
I would like to get that to you in writing.
Okay, thank you. And so I would like to say I had an opportunity to go to your banquet in the event this year, and it was very nice, well attended. I just thought it was just so good to see so many of our professionals who support our city projects and around the county get recognized for the work that they do. And I'm just looking forward to you guys continuing to expand this. So I'm really excited to hear that you were able to keep this in the budget. Thank you to Mayor Evans for keeping NWBE goals in our budget despite what's going on at the federal level. It's very important that a city of our size be able to continue this. Thank you.
I am curious. It looks like we're moving from the Flowbird system. Dr. Leslie Smith, is there a reason for that? It's been effective for me. Just curious.
So what's happening there is that one vendor is buying another vendor.
Further questions?
Yeah. I am wondering if we are, how far we are towards the goal, if this is a goal of getting on one system for parking citywide.
So, we do continue to explore both options. It's a tough question to answer at this point. We put money in the budget to convert a lot of the meters. There's still a little ways to go, but we do plan to keep working toward that goal. So I don't have a definitive answer for you right now, but just know that we are working toward that goal.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate goal, to be on. I want to be on like one system at some. That way it's consistent. People get used to it. It's regular. You know which one you're doing, and you don't have to figure out, okay, which one am I at? What do I have to do? The ultimate goal from a customer service standpoint and just ease of use is to eventually be on all on one system, which I think we'll get there. There's costs associated with it, but I think as we look to be more efficient, I think getting on one system is something that's still our goal.
Good. Yeah, thank you. In terms of the bus arm program, could you provide some data on how the program has been operating so far, like how many violations, the number of cases that have been found liable versus not liable, any other data points that you can provide?
I'm sorry, was that Bus Patrol?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, we can provide you that information.
Yeah, we have that readily available. We just gave those numbers at our last public safety briefing as well, so yeah, we provide that.
Yeah. Sounds like a good thing for a dashboard.
That will be part of a dashboard.
I'm good.
Okay, I have some questions pertaining to parking enforcement. So in the budget, if I'm understanding this correctly, we have 2 supervisor positions and 10 parking enforcement officers. This would be page 16. And my question is around understanding how those resources are deployed. So I know, for example, in policing and RPD, there's car beats and there's sections of the city that officers would be responsible for. In terms of parking enforcement, is that deployed sort of as an as-needed basis to certain locations? Is it downtown only? Is it citywide? Like, what does that look like in terms of deployment?
I'm going to ask Director Nowak to speak to that.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that question. It's on an as-needed basis.
So if a community had a particular issue that was prevalent over and over again, they could request parking enforcement to be in their neighborhood to look at something for a period of time?
They would call 311.
Okay.
You see this, and I'll give you a perfect example of that. It calls, when they don't want to call 311, sometimes they call the mayor's office, and sometimes it'd be like a large truck that was parked in the same spot forever that's blocking somebody's driveway. That's when we get a lot, and they're like, you need to, and parking will go over and take a look at that. Or an event where large crowds might be gathering and having parties on a regular basis, parking on both sides of the street. They will raise that, and that becomes an area of concern.
Got it. Okay, so in terms of deployment, I guess I'll say it this way: I received, not that I should be going on record with this, but I received a parking ticket in Park Avenue.
You paid it, right?
I paid.
Okay, good, good.
I was parked in the wrong spot, that 6 to 7 sweet spot, and I got the ticket. But if I did that on Clinton Avenue, I wouldn't have gotten a ticket, right? So I just wonder about the deployment of those resources in certain neighborhoods and not others. And it's not really a question of something that's a budget question per se, but I would like to understand a little bit more about some of the processes about deployment. So after the fact, I think I'd like to follow up on that. The other question in purchasing, and I don't know if this is just a budget book error or not, but on page 19, duplicating services shows a negative 98% variance. This is at the top, and it shows that in fiscal year 27, there's a negative 300 allocation to that. Is that?
That's a function of the chargeback.
Okay.
That is assigned to the departments using those services.
All right, I'm struggling with that, but so this would basically be that in the budget. How should we interpret that? Because I'm trying to understand it.
Okay. All the expenditures happen within finance, but there are inter-fund credits and intra-fund credits that assign those costs based on the usage back to the departments. So essentially what it's saying for, are you asking about for 25-26 or 26-27?
Looking at the proposed 27, so negative 300.
Okay. So that means essentially the entire cost of the unit has been assigned to other areas in the budget. So like architecture and engineering does a lot of printing of plans, so they're going to pay for that charge. Probably should have made that at least zero.
Got it. Okay. So essentially, anyone who wants duplicating services from purchasing, they're in their own budgets going to have the allocation in their budgets, and then it's just a charge back to the department.
Correct.
Got it.
Like budget has one for the printing of the budget books.
Right. Thank you.
Just want to build off the parking question. Councilmember Leslie Smith, you're the first person to say something nice about Flowbird that I've ever heard before. I'm really intrigued by your experience. There's not a week that goes by where I'm not with someone who I think of as a very capable person who struggles to pay for parking with Flowbird, and it's been a continued struggle. I think people try to use coins, and then they try to use card, but then I think it really wants you to use the app. I think it just wants you to use the app. I think that's part of the issue. But it doesn't tell you that. It tells you can pay all these other ways. But it has a coin slot. People use the coin slot, but it doesn't ever want to take coins. So part of my question with this transition, so Flowbird is being bought. Is that right? So will people will this acquisition have any material change to the meters themselves, or just the company administering the meters?
It's just the company administering the meters.
And so will people like my dear colleague have to download a new app?
I will ask Director Nowak to respond to that.
While the merge is happening, you can still use the Flowbird app, and it'll direct you right to Park Mobile. And
But
then
when
it's
the merger is complete, it'll be a new Flowbird app will be gone.
yes.
Okay, so I will just repeat something I've said to the mayor and the deputy mayor 1,000 times over. I really want to see us do strong PSAs to the public of how to pay. Videos of trusted people like the mayor showing here's how you use this parking meter. I think it would befuddle everyone how many smart people have a hard time using those parking meters, and it leads to either us not getting paid or people getting tickets and being angry about it.
And I think the other thing is, you mentioned the app. I mean, ideally, I would like everyone to go to the app. I think that works. But let me tell you, I had not an argument, I had a conversation with someone the other day. I was explaining to them why the app was so great. And I got cussed out. They wanted to continue to put coins in. So I think your point of the education part, video, will be very important once we get the final switch over from company to company. Make sure that there is an awareness about what you use, how you use it, how you're
And our own videos, not because I think in the past what we've said is, well, Flowbird has videos, let's put them on the website. But having trusted people from the city, community leaders, elected officials, whoever the case may be, people saying this is how you do it and showing people how it works, I think would go a very, very long way.
And it's in our best interest that we actually get the rep. I mean, we want people to be able to use it. That's how we obviously derive revenue, our expensive enterprise. So it's in our best interest to make sure that it's functioning correctly and efficiently.
Thanks. My last question on this, and I'll pass it to Councilman Martin, is still with parking and municipal violations. It looks like this year we are going to collect on 40% of our parking tickets. So President Melendez was the exception for paying his parking ticket. How do we aim to increase that number?
Well, I think a lot of our more collection activity is happening with the collection agency.
So we have a collection agency specifically for parking tickets?
Yes. We use a company called TSI.
Are you satisfied with their performance?
I'll let Director Nowak speak to that.
We're very happy with TSI. They do a great job. Great communication.
But we're only at 40% collectibles. It can't be doing that good of a job.
But that's standard with parking tickets across the country. I mean, there are people that have 50, 60, 70 parking tickets. I'm not saying that I'm pleased with 40%. I would like that for it to be much higher. But parking tickets sometimes aren't a priority for people to pay when they're doing their items. Obviously, we want to get it up. We're gonna continue to try to get it up. But I want it much higher than 40%. But if we didn't have this company helping us, it probably would be 25%.
Got it. You had something to say?
Yeah, just a quick comment. So on the PSA idea, it sounds like Councilmember Leslie Smith knows how to use Flowbird. So maybe she could do some videos for the public.
Councilmember Martin?
I'll send my questions in writing. Thank you.
Councilmember Monroe?
For municipal parking violations, does this department ticket for front yard parking?
So an MPD handles that.
Okay.
We don't ticket for individuals parking on the front of their lawn.
And so I've had this as an example. This tractor trailer is no longer parking there, but there was a problem of a resident had a tractor trailer that they would park at night when this municipal code violations, parking violations, was closed, and then they would move it early in the morning as I presumably went to work with their tractor trailer. And so it was incredibly hard to get any kind of enforcement on that because police aren't rating it as something to come to, and then everything's closed.
Yeah, and I may know that case that you're talking about in particular. I think that's, but still, there still are ways for us to still check at various hours. There's things that can be done. So I think that those one-offs like that should be escalated up so we could make sure that we follow up on them. I think the other point that you made was this parking on the line. A lot of people may not think that is a big deal, but I will tell you one of the biggest complaints I get from folks in the 19th ward are folks that park on long. And I didn't know it was a big deal until I was on one of my walks, and I probably got 4 or 5 people that said, "What are you doing about people parking on lawn?" So that might be another PSA about encouraging people not to park front yards on lawns. And I think education is the goal first before we ticket people, and then obviously after a warning or a conversation, then that would have to.
Yeah, I would say that it seems that the front yard parking has definitely increased, and it makes a difference in the visual look of a neighborhood, on top of obviously leaving ruts and making your front yard muddy. So letting people know that they can't do that would be great.
Councilmember Patterson?
Uh-oh. So let's start with Parking Violations Bureau, and then I'll get back to purchasing. So I'm going to start with a recommendation, and I know it used to be this way, and we changed it. And if you guys can tell me why we changed it, please do. Parking enforcement used to be an RPD. It's not anymore. As the council member who spends way more time than I ever want to getting cars towed, it almost takes an act of Congress to. Y'all have seen the emails where I've got 10 people in an email to get a car towed. We've all seen it. Yeah. We've all seen that email where it takes 10 people to get a car towed because only RPD can tow the car, but I got to get NBD to go out and talk to the business owner. And then I got to have the parking violations folks go by and put tickets on it. And then finally, we can get around to getting that car towed. And that's not counting the car that's sitting in our city municipal lot, the lot over there between North Union and Scio, red car with no plates on it that's been there for a month that we act like we don't see. So, recommendation, if we could find a way to wiggle this, change this, so that when we identify these cars who, in many instances, that have been hit, smashed, it ain't going nowhere unless somebody gets it with a truck or unless Councilman Patterson complains about it. We can find a way to tighten up our process so that we don't have to torture our neighbors to get these issues addressed. I understand folks complaining about people parking on the grass. Well, newsflash, I'm one of those folks who occasionally parks on the grass. I park on and I've gotten tickets for it, but let me tell you why I park on the grass. I park on the grass because I live on North Goodman Street. And I only have a 1-car garage, and I have sometimes 2-3 cars that need to park in the lot. So I'll move 1 car on the grass so that I don't leave it on the street and my car gets hit on the street, because that used to be a regular occurrence on North Goodman Street too. So I'm not defending it, but I'm telling you why people do it. And I have gotten a ticket, and I didn't complain about it. I paid it. So I get it. Not excusing it, but we have a bigger problem with cars just left, smashed, crushed. That car ain't going nowhere. And in many instances, if I'm driving by it and I've seen it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you can't convince me that we got people whose whole job it is to notice that they didn't see it. And yet it seems as though they didn't see it. And somehow in our process, we lost that, or that same car has been sitting in the same spot for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And we really see this in snow emergencies when we have cars that are buried. And the car was buried in the snow. It was never dug out. And then the weather changes and the snow comes off the car and nobody touched it. Nobody moved it. So, that's just my general neighborhood screed.
No, I think I get it. And I think that's a process improvement. When I was on a walk yesterday, I saw a car
Yeah.
that somebody complained to me was parked there for a
Right.
long time. I will say that this parking conversation makes me feel like I'm like a Catholic priest because all these confessions are coming out about tickets and parking on the lawn.
Hey,
But
I still got red light camera tickets. Look,
Yeah.
let's just tell the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, no more confessions. But I feel like Usher. These are my confessions. But let me say,
Well, I'm opposed to them.
Yeah, but let me say, Councilmember Pat, I agree with you totally, and I think that team, this is a perfect process improvement for us. We have a great PMO, and I think that this is this gives us absolute bringing this up. Something clicked with me that we're constantly coming up with process improvements. So we could use our chief data officer, our PMO, as well as our parking folks, as well as folks from the mayor's office and MBD, to come up with something on what we do to deal with cars that are parked there. I don't think the solution is to turn it over to RPD. I just don't think that to me, that I don't think that will work. I think that, to your point, it should not take an act of Congress or 5 people doing that. We just need to come up with a regular process flow to say, where are the cars, how is it happening, and how quickly are they being moved? And if they're not being moved more quickly, what are the barriers to making that happen? And let's change the doggone barriers.
Okay.
You're correct. We get that as a call that people get very frustrated about, cars that are stayed in the same place for a long time. That's on us. I just think we have to come up with a process improvement for it. And I'm hoping, I'm going to put this out there, I hope that within 3 months we can come up with something that we can share with council and the community on a process on how you move faster in terms of dilapidated, broken down, or cars that are just parked on different places. I agree with you on that. And we got the brain power. We should be able to figure that out.
Okay, so next one. The next one is this. We had a significant number of automated speeding tickets that were thrown out because our Rochester City Traffic Court was not deemed to be up to snuff. Can someone address that?
Yeah, we can provide you. I know the particular case you're speaking about, and we can give you that information in writing.
Okay.
And I'll also say, just without going into too much detail on that, we found some serious errors that were, as it relates to that. We can provide an update on that.
Okay, thank you. So that's my parking rant. I got that out the way. So now let's go to purchasing. There might be a gotcha question in here. All right. Are you doing street improvement projects through commodities contracts?
I will let Director Howard respond to that.
Can you repeat the question?
Happily. Are you doing street improvement projects through commodities contracts?
Yes.
Okay. How are you tracking MWBE through that process?
Well, we have an MWE process, and we have a utilization plan, and so and there are goals that we wish to achieve, and so there are specific goals to that particular contract, and we can get that to you in writing.
Yeah, maybe I misspoke. So I said commodities contracts. Are those commodities term contracts? You track MWB goals through commodities term contracts?
Well, the contract that you're referring to in terms of improvement, that is a term contract.
Okay. So you track all of that so we can get all of that information through all of the commodities term contracts and all those street improvement contracts. Not a problem.
Well, there's only one street improvement contract that you're referring to that is a term contract.
Okay.
But I can get to you in writing that information.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I just really wanted to reiterate what do I call you Chairman Gruber or council member?
Council members, fine.
Council
Mitch
member.
is even okay. It doesn't matter.
To reiterate what Mitch stated earlier around the parking meters, I think about my grandmother and my great uncles and aunts who go out and they have no clue. And so when Dr. Leslie is doing the PSA, hopefully we can find some of our elder community members as well to sort of like model that that same concept. And does RCTV still exist?
Oh, you going old school? Yes, it does. It does exist.
I just think that when I didn't have cable back in the day,
Channel 15.
right? I don't watch television, but I'm gonna go look for it. But I think that putting some of these things back on RCTV, I think would be helpful to community members as well. Thank you.
I want to ask. So we have enough time. If people have any final questions for finance, think on them now. I just want to ask some specifics about the bus patrol projections here. So we are, and please correct me if I'm wrong. What I believe is we're projecting $5 million in revenue from bus patrol. We're expecting it to cost us $3.172 million to administer the program, so a delta of $1.9 million. Is that right, or $1.8 million?
That's correct.
So I have a couple questions about this, but the first is, where do those projections come from? Like, what informed those projections?
So they actually come from the actual numbers that of revenue that's been generated thus far for the program. We went live with the program on January 20th, so we do have good revenue estimates, if you will, for the time period from January 20th through April 30th.
And that has roughly been the ratio of the expense of paying the vendor and administering it ourselves to money earned.
Yes, so we've collected approximately $941,000 in total revenue for that period. We paid Bus Patrol $376,000, which is approximately their 60%. In addition to the amount that we pay them for the administrative fee for the county actually viewing the videos, because there's an administrative fee that the county charges, and the majority of that fee the city is responsible for paying because most of the videos are for the city. We've actually collected the city share of that revenue, $565,000 thus far.
So receivables are a lot better. We're collecting at a much higher rate for the bus patrol tickets than we are for parking tickets.
Yes, people are paying. And I believe the reason for that, Councilmember Gruber, is because people can actually see the video.
Yeah.
So they can view the video and they can actually see the violation.
Got it.
We had someone, just a quick anecdote, we had somebody call in and be like, yeah, I was on the corner of I forgot what street they said. We said, can you pull up the video? They said, oh, that was me. Never mind. Click. So, you can actually see it. I think that helps in terms of, from a transparency standpoint. You can actually see yourself passing a bus. Either you did or you didn't. There are some cases where, they could be off, and then those can be reviewed. But I think the video is really, really what helps.
Just a couple of notes. These are maybe more comments than questions, but maybe somewhere in the middle. I'm concerned that those projections are too high. One of the things that we have learned pretty clearly when looking at automated enforcement in other communities is that it really does. One of the reasons that things like bus patrol works is because there's very few repeat offenders. When people get a ticket, a $250 ticket for passing a school bus arm, there's a high likelihood they're not going to continue to get more tickets like that. And so if this $5 million is based off of the current numbers that have come in, I would guess that we're going to see, and fortunately, this is a good thing, less people running stop arms and less tickets.
We'll see. I mean, right now, I'm very concerned about the number of repeat offenders. When we gave our public safety update around, I think 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, you would be surprised at the number of repeat. So I hope that you're right, and if that, and I hope that that is correct, because then we will adjust accordingly. But I think, based upon the initial projections, that's how we came up with that number. It could be wrong. Remember, a budget is only a projection. It might need to be changed and realized. And if we see that trending next 3-6 months, we'll have to change that. But yeah, I think. But so far, that has not bared out. With I thought for sure once you did it once, you would never do it again. But the number of repeat offenders is really concerning.
Can we make sure that Councilmember Monroe and I are on a regular monthly email from the county that gives the kind of report out from the month? I'd like to see maybe just the council central staff that can share with all of us be on some kind of monthly or quarterly update of how many tickets are in fact being written.
And I'd actually like to have and we can work on this, like a public facing. We've talked about having like a public facing dashboard, either on RPD Open Data Portal or one of the portals that we're
absolutely
shows those numbers, because we've been given those regularly at our public safety updates, and I think that will be very good for people to be able to see, and we can highlight the number of repeat offenders as well.
Yep.
We'll provide the latest numbers that we gave in our public safety update as an answer to these budget questions on how many we've gotten since January, and then how many have been repeat offenders as well.
Great. I had one more. Did you want to make a comment, Suzanne?
Yes. That estimate of $5 million was built with an assumption that there is declining revenue during the summer months as there's less buses on the road, and that there would be declining revenue collected as the year progresses based on people hopefully learning their lesson.
Okay. The last thing I want to say, and we talked about this extensively as a council, I guess this is before Councilmember Leslie Smith and Councilmember Smith were on council, but when we were establishing this about making sure there was a dedicated and transparent use of those funds. So the 1.8 million delta, I would hope that there would be some way of being able to track and understand how that money is going specifically to help with traffic safety, which is something we've talked about extensively, Mayor, as part of the Vision Zero campaign. God knows there's more than $1.8 million in cash capital that we're spending on things like improving our streets, et cetera.
You will see it's drafted at the moment, but not finalized with legislation. We are going to submit an item for the June council. It will end up being a tweener to amend finances budget for the activity that's occurred from actually back the warning period all the way through June 30th with an estimate of the revenue and expense. And in that transmittal, we're committing to providing you regular updates on expenditures that involve different traffic measures, traffic calming, things of that nature.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilor Martin?
So you mentioned people can view the video. How?
So yeah, there's an actual citation number that's referenced, and what you can do is actually go to the website and put your citation number in, and you'll be able to see it.
It's on the ticket that people get to their.
I understood. Thank you. Is there ongoing community education to act as a deterrent around this?
Yeah, so I've made it part of my every monthly public safety update, because you think public safety, you think police, you think other stuff, but traffic safety is like public safety. That's one of the top public safety that we have. So we're hoping that through our Vision Zero program, as we continue to roll that out, that's an education component. But also whenever I'm standing at a podium saying the monthly, giving a monthly update to say, please watch the buses. Young people are getting off these buses. Please don't hit it. In December, I actually played actual videos of people getting off the bus and the cars that were going on in hopes that people would see it. The news stations did pick it up, and they played the videos so people could see it. And I think that works, because I've had people that have come up to me that have said, hey, I got one of those buses, and you know what they say? I deserved it. Or they'll realize that if I'm driving in one direction and I'm passing a bus on the other direction, they weren't aware that they will be captured. They say, "Oh, now I know. I know that I won't do that." And this applies for everybody. So yeah, we will continue that campaign to be able to. Because remember, this was born out of tragedy. This was born out of people. Councilmember Monroe can speak to this eloquently because she had a child that experienced this. This was born out of so many misses and unfortunately collisions. People getting off school buses, having these crashes. So the more we can educate people, the better we can change it. We continue to try to find ways in which.
Great, thank you. And last question is going to be about red light cameras. So earlier it came up that people are still in collections essentially for tickets they got when the program was still in existence. Is there any consideration or interest or possibility in waiving those fees, especially since we realize the racial implications around how that program was structured?
We'd have to look into that. I don't know how much do we even have. Yeah, we can get that number and then follow up.
Amazing. Thank you.
Any final questions on finance? Director Jones, thank you for your time. We will start NBD exactly at 3 o'clock, so we can take a 5-minute break.
Thank you for your time.
We'll get started in 1 minute, please.
Are you talking about him or him? You know what? I'm gonna try. Not for the laptop.
Okay, we are going to get started with NBD, and I'm going to turn it over to the commissioner, not the interim, not the deputy, but the commissioner, Eric Frisch, to introduce. Wow. To introduce himself and his team and make any introductory remarks you'd like to make.
Thank you very much, Commissioner or Council Member. Is this thing on? Are we working?
Yeah,
okay,
you're good.
Okay. I wasn't expecting applause at the start of this, so
me
I
neither.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's hope we continue that vibe throughout. That would be great. Good afternoon, members of council. I hope your first day of budget hearings is going well. I'm pleased to be with you today. As was noted, my first budget hearing as Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development. A lot of work went into putting this year's budget together. And I want to start off by thanking OMB staff and our budget analyst, Christina Helgenthaler, for her assistance and guidance through this process. And also want to recognize our NBD team, and particularly Elizabeth Murphy and Chevette Lewis for leading our department's budget efforts. Joining me today are our NBD senior leadership, our bureau heads and division heads. I'm blessed with a very dedicated professional staff, so please give me a moment to introduce everyone that's sitting here with me, and I'm probably going to get the order wrong because I'm not looking behind me, but to my right, starting with our newly named Deputy Commissioner, Cosmic Reed.
Congratulations.
There's more applause than I got. Elizabeth Murphy, our Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives. Matt Simonis, Director of Zoning and Permitting. Erica Hernandez, NSC Director. Linda Hedden, Assistant Manager of Housing, who's representing Carol Wheeler, our Manager of Housing. That would be great, yes. We'll start over from the top. No, Ann Wallace, our Manager of Code Enforcement. Johanna Santiago, our Manager of Contract Services. Thad Schofield, our Manager of Strategic Business Development. Paul Scuderi, Manager of Real Estate. Ann De Silva Tella, Manager of Development. and Cale Galloway, our permit office coordinator. So thank you all for being here. This is a large department with wide-ranging responsibilities. We look forward to answering all of your questions here today, and whatever we can't answer here today, of course, we'll respond in writing. I know we've got a nice half-hour block scheduled for us today. Is it a half hour? No? Okay. So let's get into it.
Thank you. And although there were only 2 rounds of applause, all of you deserve rounds of applause for all the great work the NBD team does. Oh, yeah. Nice. So I'm going to at least try to my colleagues to, there's only 4 sections to this part of the budget. Business, well, actually 5. There's Office of the Commissioner, Business, Housing Development, Zoning and Permitting, Neighborhood Preservation, and Buildings and Compliance. Let's try to take them one by one, but if we get to a certain point and we're not making progress, I'll open it up to the entire section. Can we start, though, Commissioner Frisch? You, I believe it was last year, that NBD had a pretty sizable reorg, and I think it was in this budget hearing. It may have been 2 years ago. Time is a bit of a blur, but this council very specifically and intentionally asked for a little bit more clarity as to what the reorg was. I think particularly as it pertained to some of the compliance and code enforcement work. Is that reorg, I'm assuming you were part of that as the deputy commissioner at the time. Is there any major functional changes to the way the department is organized at this point?
The good news this year is no, there are no major structural changes planned for that are proposed for the department for this year. Obviously, the big change are the new commissioner and the new deputy commissioner. The deputy commissioner will reside in the Bureau of Buildings and Compliance functionally, similar to how the deputy commissioner previously, although in the budget in the commissioner's office, resided in the Bureau of Business and Housing Development.
So the housing and business and neighbor development work feeds up to you, and most of the enforcement and compliance work feeds up to Deputy Commissioner Reed. Is that right?
That's a fair way to look at it, for sure. Yeah, and we do have one vacancy then for Director of Business and Housing Development, which will be something we'll be putting a focus on right away to get that position filled.
Got it. Okay, so I would direct people to the Office of the Commissioner, which is on page 4 and 5 and 6, and see if there's any questions starting there before we move on to the meat and potatoes right afterwards. Councilmember Martin.
On page 5 in the KPIs, how do you measure the overall customer satisfaction rate for NBD services?
Well, historically, we have had an overall KPI for customer satisfaction for our department that brought together all of the other kind of sub bureaus and divisions satisfaction, measured in a variety of ways based on the services that are being provided. We brought that all together, and that then represented the overall department customer satisfaction rate. And so we're proposing that that's maybe not the most efficient or effective, accurate way to do that. So we're actually proposing to eliminate that and focus just on the bureau level customer satisfaction rates that you'll see as you go through our section of the budget in each of the bureaus.
Okay, so we're going to move into the next section, which is business and housing development, starting at page 7 and going through page 10. And I'll just start with, I think, probably the obvious question, which is there's 3 vacant full-time positions eliminated due to budget constraints. What is the impact to the community when we think about those positions?
Yeah, that's correct. We have 3 full-time positions in BHD that were vacant, and we are proposing to eliminate those. One, we had made the decision early on that we did not need in our BHD admin division. we can do that work with the existing staff that we have. The other two positions that are being eliminated, one is in housing and one is in real estate. And again, we did an analysis of the work that we're doing, and while this will be something that's felt by staff, we do not anticipate that this will be something that would result in any changes to service level for the community.
Thanks. And Mayor and Suzanne, I guess a question to ask at some point over the course of these 3 days is, with given the number of positions that are being eliminated due to budget constraints, is there a kind of prioritization level of what comes back if things look different? We find ourselves in somehow a rosier situation than it appears right now. I know that there's not a single person in this room who doesn't acknowledge housing as being one of the most important places to put some time and effort. So I'm wondering how you would think about that prioritization.
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, I'll back up and talk about the prioritization of positions that were eliminated. I think it's important to note that we made sure when we took a position out, either one, it was vacant, or two, it was a position that would not interfere with the core function of housing. So there are positions in departments across the city where, while they may be important, they may not be essential to the functions in carrying out whatever the organization is doing. So that's one. And then to answer your question two, yes, there is a prioritization of things that will come back. We always say, if we get dollars for X, Y, or Z, this is what we would do differently. So, for example, when we talk about the pension smoothing, which we had a lot of conversations about earlier, we said if we got more dollars for that, that's something that we would not do. And we do the exact same thing for positions. But I will say that had we not be getting these dollars that we're getting from the state, the number of people that are actually occupying positions, that number would have been a lot higher. So it makes this process a little bit easier, because we're talking about, in many instances, positions that aren't currently filled by individuals, but positions that we've identified as important, and that if we get more dollars, we'd want to add to it. But as you pointed out and others pointed out, we are up positions year over year when you look over that 4-year period. So it's all about prioritization. We have that. And if we do get more dollars, we will be judicious in how we go about adding it. We just have to be able to be prepared and ready to do more with less. And I think MBD has demonstrated that they are prepared to do that with this budget.
Thanks.
Since 21-22, NBD is up 24 positions, 12 of them city funded, 12 of them grant funded, and that accounts for the elimination of the positions we're talking about.
Thanks.
So remember, and this goes back to the strategy where I know people thought I was crazy, and we kept saying, hey, ARPA's not going to be here, ARPA's not going to be here. We used that time to kind of build up what we thought was important and what we wanted to build. So that way, in these out years that we're coming in now, it makes it harder to be able to tear it apart, if you get what I'm saying.
I do.
But it forces us to still make some trade-offs.
Thanks. Councilmember Leslie Smith, followed by President Melendez.
Hopefully I'm in the right section. So I noticed that the NIA program, I believe, has 4 FTEs, community planners, they're called. Outside of the management of the NIA program, I would imagine there's a lot of ramp up, when people are calling about getting their grants. But is there other duties assigned to them that they're being used for in the NSCs?
Yeah, so the dream with NIA overall is that once we have this, as those who may not know, Neighbors in Action, NIA, is that they will also be doing a lot of community building to get the community involved post the grant. So the grant is kind of like the carrot to get them involved, but then the ultimate goal is long term is to have them interacting with these community-based organizations in each of the quadrant, to get them up and running to do other community-based programs, and to be kind of not just ambassadors, but people in their community that can lead civic events, civic engagement from the training perspective. So the hope is that these folks that we have here that are in these jobs will be more than just, hey, you got your grant, what are you doing? But long term, we'll be able to say, okay, you got your grant. Hey, you may not get the next one, or you may get the next one again, but how can we still keep you engaged? Because now that we're on our second round, you combine the two number of, that's like 100+ organizations across 4 quadrants of the city. That is a powerful tool to help us get involved and serve and solve some of the neighborhood challenges that we have in our community, but also to empower people, to give them an opportunity to see how they want to chart their community. So the idea is that those folks would be the liaisons, be the assistants to help them navigate City Hall, but also help them to be able to grow what each of those groups are doing in their neighborhood.
That's really great to hear. I do think that, and I don't know how unique this model is because I've never lived anywhere else other than Rochester, but I think we have something really special with our neighborhood service centers, having a mini city hall in each one of the quadrants. However, there are some inconsistencies, right? It depends on who the individual is at that particular NSC. So hopefully, as we're thinking about what these community planners will be utilized for, there would be, this consistent demonstrated effort across the quadrants so that every neighborhood, every quadrant is able to truly benefit.
I think some of that too is, and I'll let the commissioner speak to this, is internally our structure. We have to ensure that depending on whatever NSCU is, that experience in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, community connection is the same. And that's a goal that we continue to try to work on as we scale up, do well on our NSCs. I mean, we have a great new director, Erica. Has Erica been on for a year? Has it been a year yet, Erica? Happy anniversary. So,
Erica's amazing.
Yeah, so Erica has done a great job in making sure that feel is the same regardless of if you are. So if you're in the Southwest, you should get that same experience that you have if you're in the East, knowing that the East neighborhood is different, but that service should be good. The questions, the answers, all of that, the response, that should be the same. I think that if we are successful with NIA, we'll get there because the community-based organizations will also help us get there. Because they'll be able to, I don't want to say demand, but demand that, hey, we want this level of quality in our community. How are you doing this NSCs? And they have this great conduit, which is these community planners, which I kind of call NIA ambassadors that are kind of representing that. I don't know, Commissioner, if there's anything.
I'll just note first that's the Bureau of Neighborhood Preservation, so we can always revisit the conversation when we get to that section. But of course, note that the vision for the future of the NSCs, right, is to be that hub for resident civic engagement in the neighborhoods, right? And so what the mayor's talking about with how the NIA staff, ambassadors, community program planners are doing is really furthering that.
President Melendez, on BHD.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick note on that for council members Leslie Smith and Smith. That sounds like a law firm, by the way. Leslie Smith and Smith. So we did a neighborhood service center study as well, and I just remembered that we did a work session on that probably in December. So we'll make sure we get you both a copy of the report on neighborhood service centers, and then we do have a work session in a couple months for an update on NSCs specifically. So we'll have some time to get into that more. So questions on housing. I know that our calendar year doesn't jive with the federal calendar year. So just trying to understand timing of CDBG. So I know we do our annual action plan now. In terms of when the next time we would have to consider any potential cuts, would that be in the next budget year, or would we potentially face something if the federal government decided to do something in the fall?
When our stuff is coming now, but anything the federal government would do would be in the next budget year, 27. So we have our stuff for 26, 27, and then the federal budget, as you know, is weird. It kind of runs October to October.
Right.
So if the current president's budget, and you were at the meeting when I went through the federal cuts, basically proposes to zero out CDBG. I hope to God that doesn't happen, but that's what it proposes. So when we're sitting here next year, if that happens, we would be in a different, we'd be having a different conversation. And then next June, you wouldn't be getting all those pieces of legislation that are coming this June for CDBG. As you know, the bulk of the legislation that you'll be getting next month, yes, some of it's budget, a lot of it is CDBG.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So when we were here last year, there were some uncertainties, right, around that HUD funding, CDBG, home, HOPWA, et cetera. As the mayor says, there was the president's position was to zero everything out, right, at least when it came to CDBG and home. And thankfully, Congress did not see that in the same way, and largely kept things flat, as you'll see in the June items. But certainly, the federal budget year that's supposed to begin October, we know about the budget, the continuing resolutions that they have that push things out. Takes a while, right, for Congress to come together on what the budget's going to be. So we'll be paying obviously close attention to that, given the potential impacts on staff and services.
Yeah, I think that's my follow up is I think we fund something like 50 positions total through HUD resources. Could we get a breakdown in writing of what positions actually are funded through CDBG?
Yeah, we have that actually, because as we were talking about our doomsday scenario, we know how many people that is, and that's something that we have readily available. I think the other point I'll make, and I don't want to get on I try to be calm when we talk about the federal government, that it's easy for me to say that I don't think they would do this, but I will tell you in 2024, December, when I was sitting in my office on a call with a bunch of mayors, I said there's no way that they would do this with SNAP. I said, oh yeah, they would never do that with Medicaid. It would affect so many people, including people in their areas. Here we are. And now here we are figuring out how we're going to support. I think the number is something like 4,000 people that come June 1st in this community. 4,000. That's people, not counting families, that are going to be kicked off SNAP. And then Medicaid comes back up in January. They're going to be just probably more than that, even kicked off there. So while I'm cautiously optimistic that would never happen with CDBG, I think your point, Mr. President, is something that the broader community and this council and the staff needs to understand, that we've seen so much crazy stuff in the last 15, 16 months that we can't take it as an article of faith that CDBG will be around. I think we'll be okay. I hope we're okay, but we're seeing things that we've never seen before where we can't say that it's going to be there.
Yeah, anything that helps people seems to be on the menu. So, okay, and then in terms of housing, I see that we have many projects that we are aware of and have been in the pipeline for some time. I do want to ask, though, because I know that this has been floating, by the block continuation. Is that something that the administration has contemplated, or is that something, where are we in considering any future?
Yeah, this is the second round, if you will, of by the block that we're currently in the Southwest, and where that's obviously well underway. We're not necessarily at this time proposing a third round of what we call by the block, although I wouldn't rule out other future affordable home ownership projects. But of course, we're also working with partners on affordable home ownership, whether it's First Genesis or the Land Bank or other developers that are looking to deliver affordable home ownership projects.
The other thing that you'll get an update on soon, and we'll be talking more about it, is Office of Financial Empowerment is launching Home Prosper, which will be which is a home ownership program that will be similar to that. And as we look to our quest of, and I set this out, of trying to get 100 new homes on vacant lots through modular. We got our pilot in the Northeast right now on near Scio. Yeah, over near Scio. We want to see more of that as well, because that lowers the cost of by the block from by the block. And I think that is a great opportunity for us to have. We may not call it by the block, but between Home Prosper and this vacant lot to homes. Although I do like by the block, the state has adopted block by block, which they kind of modeled after by the block. And the mayor of New York City now has a program that he's going to call block by block. So by the block's got a lot of play there. So I think that we'll continue to look for ways to continue to expand that home ownership race, and looking at the modular. I think that has a lot of potential on vacant lots that we have at the city. If you have not seen some of these, they are amazing, and they're cheaper, they're affordable, and they move quickly. And and God knows we have the lots in the city of Rochester where they can be.
Yeah. Last question. I don't know if it belongs in this section, but I'm going to put it here anyway. Demolitions. Seems like we consistently, and emergency demolitions specifically, we're seeing that go up. I'm assuming many of them are structure fires. I know Otis Street was a major cost to the city. Obviously, we can't prevent all of those things, but in terms of trying to manage and prioritize demolitions, emergencies, I understand they have to come down. How are we equitably looking at demolition as a program and making sure that we are also investing resources in tearing down? There's a balance for me personally of tearing down homes versus rehabbing, but when we have problematic houses that are consistently causing issues or concerns in the community, what is our process for prioritizing what goes to a private demolition hearing, or how do we move quicker on certain city demos?
Let me have the commissioner talk about the overall mechanics and how the process works. Let me just give you my overall philosophy on what I think is important as it relates to demolition. I mean, I like to try to avoid demolitions at all costs if we have the ability to rehab a home and get it back on the tax. Because if we can get the land bank to take it, if we can get somebody else to take the property and get it back up to its useful life, that is the best use of our resources and time, because the cost of demolitions is just ridiculous. I mean, it exceeds the amount that sometimes that someone can buy for a house. That commercial property on Otis Street, I think that was over $1 million, right? That it cost for a demo. Think about what we could have done with that. But that was structurally unsound. It was dangerous. It was a nuisance. There's some properties, they just got to be demoed, right? They're not fit for man or mouse. They got to come down. But my philosophy has been, and I have to sign off on most demos that are over a certain amount. You're able to sign off on ones that are under a certain threshold. My question is, could it be safe? Could it be secure? Could it be put back to its useful life? Could it be a new home for somebody to be able to live in? And I think that those are the questions that we ask. But because of 60 years of neglect in some cases, some of these properties are just so dilapidated that there's nothing you really can do with them other than demo. But the priority and the first goal is always to try to see if we can preserve them, get them back on the tax rolls, get them to a person that can put the house back to its useful life. You want to
just a really quick, Mayor, if I could chime in. So on the corner of Remington and Leo Street, there's a burnout house. I don't know how long it's been there. I'm going to say over a year. By my appearances, I've seen better houses come down faster. And so when I get at the question of prioritization, and I haven't raised this property to the administration at all, so this is not something that I've followed up personally before, but systematically, I just wonder, what is the process for getting that?
I will add one point, then I'll let the commissioner chime in. Is one of the things that are immediate as it relates to the fires is that the fire department, and you guys can correct me, they were making an immediate determination. I mean, there have been cases where a house was structurally unsound in the fire. I'm like, wait a minute, what is this doing in my office already? You want me to sign off on this? They're like, well, it's a fire. It's a fire. It's dangerous. It's going to come down. That has to move immediately. So that takes precedence, priority. That's 911. And we have those. And you saw that Otis Street. That was an example, right? I mean, that we moved almost immediately to be able to do that. But if we could have preserved that, we probably would have, because why would we want to do the $1 million? And then we do go after the owner of the property to get them to pay it back. Sometimes that's met with mixed success, right? But I will say the safety priority is number one, regardless of where it is, where it's located, or how it looks. And oftentimes what you see is you see something, and I'll say, wait a minute, why isn't this down yet? And they'll say, well, no, it's been looked at by the fire department. It's still structurally sound. It could be there. Or other ones, like, okay, it had to come down immediately, but it's because it was given a thorough analysis by the fire department, and they have called for it to come down as an emergency demolition. And usually those are not cheap at all to do, and in fact, very, very expensive.
Yeah, those emergency demos are certainly have become very problematic budget-wise for us. And yeah, there was a $1.8 million, I believe, for Otis, so spectacular cost. And we've seen others, right? We can all name what some of those are, and they're hard to predict, and they're hard to cover the cost of. But we persevere, and we figure that out. As the mayor said, the immediate demos, those are determined by the fire department when they are on site and identify that there's an immediate danger. And then the 3-day demolitions are the result of an inspection from a certified code official that determines that there's a imminent danger to public health and safety to leave that building in place. So that's kind of how those emergency or the immediate and the 3-day get determined. But I would ask either Deputy Commissioner or Johanna to weigh in on any process-related questions.
You hear me? No, it doesn't work. The mayor touched on a point for you, council member, president, as it relates to you. From the outside, the building may look like it's bad, but structurally, from a structural standpoint, it is okay. That's why the fire department left it. There are others where it may look okay, but structurally, it is toast on the inside, and then that's when we have to have the fire department demolish those. As it relates to the 3-day, even though we say it's 3 days, but technically it goes up to at least 6 weeks before those come down, because we have to go through the legal process with the law department. We have to give the property owner the opportunity to make repairs, and then if they don't do that, then we just take the legal action to get the property demolished.
Councilmember Martin.
On page 8 in the key performance indicators, can you talk about how it's possible to increase the number of affordable housing units rehabbed or preserved with city assistance from 10 this year to 734 in the upcoming year?
Sure. It's the hard work and determination of This really comes down to the timeline that some of these large projects come due, right? So in this particular case, you have Andrews Terrace and Park Square 2, which account for most of those units, if I'm not mistaken.
And we have, and it's all about pipeline, but I think it also demonstrates how long it takes for some of these to happen. So some of these we've been talking about since I started, right? And now they're coming due. So I think you're going to see, we may even exceed that number. I don't know. Hope we do. So you're gonna see more of those numbers start to go up, and they'll ebb and flow based upon the timeline.
That's helpful. And last question on this section: the home buyer assistance program for city employees. How many employees have successfully used that program?
That's a good question. I think we'll have to respond in writing on that one.
Sounds good. And I said that was my last, but other question regarding housing. One of the things I have heard is the fact that we require inspections sometimes makes it harder for people to use grants. And it's a good thing to require those inspections. However, is there a way to change the city law to require all homes being sold to have inspections, or is that within the purview of New York State?
You know, here's the challenge is that back in the day, you would do the inspection and the seller would be fine with it. They'll say, all right, you can move. But because the housing market is so tight and there's so few homes, the sellers are now, and I think this may start to change soon. They're in the catbird seat, so they can say, "Hey, if you want this house, you're not going to do the inspection." The challenge is for particularly a new homeowner. Let's say they avoid to do that inspection, and they get a grant from the city. You have to live there for a certain period of time, and you go and they move in, and then all of a sudden they find out there's asbestos in the house. I mean, here's somebody that worked all their life, and then they're able to go and finally afford a home, and then you find out there's asbestos or there's radon or there's some of these other things that an inspection would find that you wouldn't know until you moved in. So I think it's a balancing act. I think how we get around that is we have to make sure that we just build more housing in the city, because when people are desperate to move forward on wanting to buy a home, and I've had plenty of people who I've warned not to forego the inspection. They're like, Malik, if I do that, I'm going to lose the house. Sometimes it's a crapshoot because you do not know what you're going to find. So I think that's the balancing act that we have to find. But I think it gets to the larger issue of just available inventory and the desperation that people are willing to waive an inspection on something that you're going to commit to for 30 years and play a mortgage on. I think that's the balancing act that we have to figure out and walk on. I think how we solve that is by trying to build and build as many units for we can as we can on home ownership to try to increase the supply.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yes, I fully agree with you. Like, these inspections should absolutely occur. But the question of evening the playing field, in this moment where it becomes very competitive and people who need the grants and qualify may miss out on that opportunity due to that timeline.
I think, you could, and with something we'd have to workshop or brainstorm, you could come up with something that you have somebody sign to say, hey, if you do this and you're getting a grant from the city, X, Y, and Z will happen. You could do that in order to try to be competitive, but I think we'd have to shop that because there are so many rules related to any of the grant dollars that we're giving out, and a lot of them do require that inspection. So that I think we'd have to workshop to see Absolutely. What the options would be if we were able to do that, or even if we were able to do that, what would something like that look like?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The federal dollars that we use require inspections, so we're limited in what we can do there. I'd certainly want to defer to law department on the question of requiring all sales to have inspections. I'd imagine that's a state legislative issue. But.
Yeah, any research on that, on who's able to enforce something like that or create something like that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a bill at the state level. Assemblymember Clark is carrying it. We signed a memorializing resolution, what was it, Jen, last month, 2 months ago, in favor of that bill that would make inspections mandatory to offer. All sellers would have to offer an inspection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've read about other municipalities seeing if they could do it on their own, but I don't know where that falls. So interested in whether it even exists or if anyone else has done that at all.
We can confer with the law department on that, but I bet it would be like a state thing.
Absolutely. That sounds good. Thank you.
Councilmember Monroe.
For the Employer Assisted Housing Initiative, how many other organizations are participating in that?
Great question. I can't tell you off the top of my head, so I'm going to call on Linda Hedden to see if she could answer that question.
And I guess not just the number, but which ones?
Sorry. We have the U of R, we have the City of Rochester, we've got, I believe, Highland Hospital recently. We are just embarking with ESL.
Microphone, please.
It's on.
Could you speak right into it?
Sorry, is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, City of Rochester, City School District, ESL, University of Rochester, recent expansion there, RIT, Highland Hospital.
Yeah, we'll provide a full list in writing just to be sure we get you all of them.
Because as part of that, those organizations also put money toward the down payment. Is that correct?
That is correct. The city matches.
I would love to see outreach to the Eastman Business Park.
Yeah, we're always looking for more participants, so we'd be happy to reach out to businesses in Eastman Business Park if there'd be any interest, for sure.
Great. For the Marina Overlook site at 5752 Lake Avenue, we're looking now at fourth quarter. So where are we?
We've extended our MOU with the preferred developer for these exclusive negotiations. It's taking a bit more longer than expected. They're going to be doing another round of environmental testing on the site. This is all about confirming whether or not the property qualifies for the brownfield cleanup program through New York State DEC, which accesses the brownfield tax credits, which would be a important financing tool for a project there. They are also, though, looking at other avenues of financing, and we still feel that is the best proposal for the site. So we're giving them some more time, given the challenges in financing projects right now.
In the midst of all of this, are they doing any tweaking as far as their plans for what the setup will be, what the plan will be as far as height and things like that?
At this time, they're still trying to deliver the project that they have presented to us and worked with us on. I think that depending on the outcome of that environmental testing and other conversations related to other financing tools, I would not be surprised, that if they make some refinements, in which case we'll have to make a decision at that time.
Because obviously, I think it would be a very popular location, being right on the lake, essentially, and certainly the views that many of the units could have, I think, would be spectacular. So, looking forward to that.
Completely agree.
In addition, obviously, the businesses then across the street would really get a lot more business. And that brings me to Gardener's Lofts. Where are they in doing their planning and bringing their whole new project to the city?
Yeah, well, the good news is it's on its way. I think they're already doing some site work out there now, and they intend to be fully under construction in August with the new replacement building.
Oh, great!
Replacing the historic building that burned down. Yeah.
So is that something that I could have a copy of so I can see what the rendering looks like, and then the number of units and things like that? So I know it would still be primarily for veterans, but with the prior plan, there was the ability to have some units that would be for families.
The project has not changed in terms of the makeup of the units. They've stuck to the same number, the same type, and generally the new building takes the same form and feel as the historic building that preceded it. Just some minor changes. With modern buildings now, you can have a more open format on spaces than you would have in the historic building. But it's been through site plans, so we'll provide those materials.
Thank you. And in regards to the land banks of Rochester Roots Affordable Home Ownership Project in the Northwest, is that something that will be done instead of a by the block program?
It's very similar to by the block, except that it's being done through the land bank with a land bank's developer partner, the Rochester Cornerstone Group, and they expect to close on that project, the financing for that project in the very near future, and begin work.
To the point that was asked about, like by the block, the next phase, I think Councilmember Leslie Smith asked that. That's the type of stuff we want to continue to try to do more on. Here you're going to have an area, northwest Rochester, that's going to have great opportunity for home ownership, good partnership. I think that's a good model of using the land bank as well to do more of this. And I think that the environment that we're in, based upon all the fiscal stuff we talked about, that's the model we're going to have to replicate around the city, along with the modular private developments on vacant city lots that people can be take advantage. I think that's going to put us ahead of a lot of other cities if we continue down that.
Great. And could I just have more information, background about that, what the housing would look like and things of that nature?
Absolutely. Happy to provide.
Great. In regards to the giant fire at Otis Street, are we monitoring some of our large vacant manufacturing facilities for fire hazards? And Otis Street, were there also old chemicals involved for that, Wyatt?
I'd have to get back to you on the specifics of the fire. I'm not 100% familiar with it. But I can tell you that, yes, we are regularly looking at paying visits to the known problematic buildings, regularly having conversations across departments and with the owners to hold them accountable for keeping those buildings safe and secure.
For the demolitions, could I have a list of the properties currently on our demolition list and also the ones that went through emergency demos? This would all be for fiscal year 26.
Yes, we can provide.
Thank you. Oh, and then further sorted by quadrant, please.
Absolutely.
You set, Councilmember? Sorry,
no, I have my questions kind of scribbled all along here, and I just wanted to make sure I have. One of the things I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if we give people information about this as well, but the state OPHR does have a program for houses of significant historical significance can get a 10%, and it, provided they're in low mod income areas, they can get a 10% rebate on the work that is done. It just has to be pre-approved by OPHR, and then once it's certified and the work is done, you apply for that credit when you file your taxes.
I was admittedly not familiar with that program, but that is something we can look at promoting through our website.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many areas in the city. I know there's a substantial number. Well, maybe not substantial, but quite a few houses, certainly in Maplewood, and then we may have some others south in the district.
Thank you.
The vacant building registry, it's projected to decrease from 50% to 30%. What does that reflect?
So we the number that going down to 30 is really reflective of the experience that we've had to date, and as well as to our peer to the east in Syracuse that's had a vacant building registry for significantly longer than we have, and they are at that kind of 30% number. So we're looking to benchmark against them.
Is that generally something where the city has to be proactive in noting that something is vacant and then finding that owner and verifying that it's vacant?
Yeah, I mean, we know where the vacants are, right? We know the properties that are vacant. It's then up to the property owner to register, right, their property in the VBR. And I think, the primary motivator or disincentive for owners to register are the insurance requirements. So I'd be happy to provide some additional information in writing or ask Deputy Commissioner to provide more information.
Okay, thanks. And one last question, or maybe more of a statement. For the neighborhood service centers, I know in the Northwest we're beginning to bring back together kind of the players in the neighborhood so that we can look at what could be a holistic plan for the Northwest. And I'm just wondering or suggesting that such a comprehensive plan happens in all our neighborhood service centers so that each one can target the areas that really need to be targeted, and also people can understand why certain things get ticketed, why other things don't, etc.
Okay, we can look into that for other offices.
Councilmember Patterson or Smith, either of you questions on BHD? Okay. BHD is Councilmember Smith. We're looking at pages 7 through 10. Okay. Just a quick, 2 quick questions here from me. The last strategic initiative is to attract a food retailer to downtown. Obviously, that's been a long-term goal of the city's. I don't think you'd be putting it in here if there wasn't some positive action or traction. So, what can you share at this point?
So we have one that is I don't want to miss that, but we have one that's going to be going into the old what was the old place called? DGX. The old DGX at Sibley's across from Parcel 5. That's supposed to be coming. It's going to happen. Now that we're saying it, I mean, it's been reported on. I think it's been through Comida, but that's a big breakthrough for downtown Rochester.
Same footprint.
Yes, that's a big breakthrough for downtown Rochester. And I'm being reminded by a lot of my downtown residents. They said, "Mayor, you said when we hit 10,000 people that we get a grocery store, and we've now exceeded 10,000." So I think that this is a good first step to have a mini grocery store down. These margins are very hard to have, and we're hoping with some other changes that we hope to see at the city in the coming year, we'll be able to use other methods to attract tourists, including in Bull's Head. Talked about Redwood Plaza. We talked about a lot of places. We want to see these places that will serve as good. But the first one that we're putting in is down here. Hopefully, in all deliberate speed, it should be open soon.
Thanks. And what's the timeline for 151 Mount Hope?
Well, we went through the RFP process, and we're in the final stages of evaluating and making a recommendation up. So I imagine in the coming, let's say, month, we'll have a recommendation on a decision for that site.
Great. My last question on this section, and it's not really, it's this section and also DES and also overall, we had projected several $1 million for the sale of School 29. That didn't happen. What does that mean for the budget book in front of us? So there was some, Suzanne's looking at me befuddled, but there was some cost for all the, in the DES Department of building maintenance. There was also just generally, I'm asking because we're in real estate here, how do you modify the budget given those revenues and lack of expenses that were expected?
Can you repeat the number again that you quoted?
There was, I just said a multitude of millions of dollars, but
gotcha.
Miguel just said it was
Okay.
$3 million.
So
what do we do to make up for that?
The one school that was held is this year. We were counting on the revenue coming in this year, prior to June 30th. So that creates a problem.
For this year's close. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
I believe the school that you did approve, we're counting on the revenue in this 26-27 year by the time we close.
Okay.
So we'll have to make some tough choices to make up that revenue, because as you know, whenever we do the budget, it's a big pot, just dollars, as you know. So we'll have to figure out how we can offset the loss of that sale that did not take place and probably won't take place this fiscal year unless something changes. We're closing out.
We're a month away from year end, fiscal year end.
Yeah, so we're a month away from fiscal year end. I was hoping that sale would have been realized in the third quarter, because that would have given us better view of our year end. Right?
Correct.
If we would have had that. So I still write these numbers down like on here, like adding and subtracting on here like old school. So we'll have to figure out we have to figure out within this existing budget where we get that money from. Hence why I'm telling people on my staff, don't spend any more money from now until we want to pay our bills, but don't spend any more money on anything new between now and June 30th, because we need to get a better picture on how the revenue is going to shake out this fiscal year.
But there is a chance that if that school building is not sold, there will be additional cuts having to come.
Maybe.
Okay.
We got to find ways to make up the revenue, because the budget calls. The budget is, as I tell people all the time, it's a projection, right? We project, because we can't project into the future. So we projected that amount, that cost. So whenever something doesn't happen, sales tax or pension ends up coming in higher than it is, we have to make it up within the budget that you all approved. So now we'll have to make it up within that budget that you approved, knowing that fund balance is not an option on this, because we're at the statutory limit on what we're taking from that.
Okay.
So we'll have a tough decision to make.
Just confirming. Okay, moving on to zoning and permitting, page 11. And since some folks have already asked questions on neighborhood preservation, which is the neighborhood service centers, we'll open it up to that section too. Let's just keep questions for buildings and compliance to be at the tail end. So right now, zoning and permitting, neighborhood preservation.
If it is okay, I do have a couple of housing questions. I finally figured out how this is organized.
By all means, we're doing great on time.
And I do believe Vice President has some questions in housing as well.
Okay, we can start. All three of you can.
Appreciate it. Now
I'll
make this quick. The critical process includes the promotion of market rate and affordable housing. I'm just curious what the spectrum of that is. It looks like the KPI says that there's going to be 164 budgeted, but in terms of the spectrum of extremely low, very low income, and market rate, what does that look like? Can we get a breakdown in writing?
We'd be happy to explain what that all means in writing and what the projects are that we're referring to in our KPIs. But basically, when we're saying affordable and market rate, we're talking about the whole spectrum of housing types, right, or rental housing types.
Great. So I'm wondering if the 164 is spread out across the spectrum, and if you can tell me in terms of the number of units in each one of those areas.
Absolutely, yeah. The 164 refers to new affordable rental units. So those are regulated affordable units. Mm-hmm. The projects are the True North project, Park Square 2, the new build component of Park Square 2, and then the Beechwood family apartments.
Okay. And some of those would vary between extremely low, very low, and low income.
We can get you the unit AMI breakdown.
Perfect. And part of the reason why I'm asking, because I'm just curious if we are measuring or we have some sort of indication as to how these investments are reducing racial disparities. Far too often our extremely low, very low income homes are in already low income Black and brown communities, and that just reinforces redlining. And so I'm curious if you have some thoughts around.
Well, certainly, our goal is to be delivering affordable housing all across the city, right? Not concentrating in any one particular area and repeating mistakes of the past, right? So we certainly support your suggestion that the more housing that we're creating and the more housing that we're creating at affordable levels is helping give all of our residents access to safe, quality housing, which gives that's the first step, right? Is having a safe place, the roof over your head. So we'd be happy though to provide you with that breakdown of the units.
That would be fantastic, and if it could explain the impact of the investments, that would be helpful for me to understand. And then my last question around demolitions. Do we have a plan in place to immediately get a vacant lot that was recently, demoed into the hands of a mission-minded investor? What's the process and timeline for that?
Well, so typically after we demolish a home, if it's on a city-owned property, which often it's not, right? So first we have to take possession of that property, and that can take some time. And then typically we are always willing to accept proposals for our city-owned vacant lots, and then we also do offer properties up through RFP for development at different points during the year. So if there are any mission-minded organizations looking to acquire vacant lots, we're more than happy to have that conversation.
Thank you for that. I'm just wondering if there is or can be in the future more intentionality around that. So yes, RFPing them is but if we already know that a home is going to come down and the city has acquired that lot, if there's a expedient process of then getting that lot into the hand of Habitat or some other investor so that those lots don't remain vacant. We know that vacant lots oftentimes attract bad actors, and so if there's a way in which we can shorten that timeline, that would be great.
Happy to have that conversation with our real estate team and our buildings and compliance team.
Thank you.
Vice President Harris.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to say thank you again for your hard work and congratulations again. Being
thank you.
New commissioner, first time doing this. I'd like to piggyback off of what my colleague said here, LaShonda Leslie Smith, Dr. LaShonda Leslie Smith. I would like to say that I agree with her that, we should make sure we be more intentional about how we handle vacant lots and including demolitions and even vacant homes. So I'd just like you to, for consideration, to consider maybe businesses like, there are daycare centers that's looking for vacant lots. There's businesses that's looking for vacant lots. So we can kind of like expand, not only just looking for homeowners, but look at opportunities among the neighborhoods for that. I like to ask a question on page 8. Yeah, on page 8, I would like us to focus on number 3, where it says new market rate rental units created with city assistance. I'd like to ask if you can provide some insight as to why we went from 111, budgeted 111 to 41. Does this reflect a slowdown in development activity or a shift in funding priorities when it comes to affordable units?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so like the other sections, the number is basically dependent on when projects are completed. So in this case, this is just referring to a few projects. A portion of the Clinton Square project, 146 University Avenue, and 9 through 17 North Clinton are two smaller projects that we anticipate are being completed in the coming fiscal year. What I would say is, if you look at the numbers, you can see that market rate is trailing other types of housing, and that just, I think, speaks to some of the challenges in the marketplace with delivering projects, especially when they don't have built-in sources of financing to deliver them. So, looking at strategies to support workforce and market rate housing is something that we're focused on. Make sure that we're delivering housing at all income levels across the city.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask, what would be your strategy in guarding displacement when you're revitalizing areas? When it comes to displacing residents from their neighborhood, how do you guard against that displacement and make sure that's done equitably?
Sure. Yeah, we regularly hear about gentrification and displacement, right? And I think displacement is the bigger issue, right? It's not necessarily bringing wealth into the community. It's when that wealth supplants existing residents, and that's something that we can't accept. So identifying strategies to minimize and prevent displacement of existing residents has to be at the core of what we're doing. I know we've taken a really strong position on that with Interloop North, for instance, and the planning work that's gone into that in advance of any development. What I would say, a few things. I think that investments in the regulated, affordable, permanent supportive housing units that we've talked a bit about here ensure that there are quality units available for our residents that are low income, very low income. and are therefore most at risk of potential displacement. Our rehab programs help to keep lower income residents in their existing homes, thereby preventing their displacement, right? If they can't stay in the home because they can't afford to maintain it, we're not doing any good by them or by our neighborhoods. Increasing opportunities for affordable home ownership enables more households to become homeowners. We're really focused on those that have been shut out of the home buying process, and when they are able to become homeowners, then therefore less susceptible to those market dynamics that that lend itself to displacement. And then lastly, I'd probably say that our some of our HUD funded programs, right, that again you'll see in June, or you've seen many times before, things like the landlord tenant services or foreclosure prevention services are also things that we can do to help to minimize and prevent displacement of our residents.
I will say that you guys did a great job of preventing foreclosures last year, and actually you increased those numbers significantly, and look forward to seeing what you guys do this year again. I have one final question is, I haven't really heard a whole lot about zombie homes at all. I don't know if our city has that as an issue, and if you do have a list of zombie homes, can you provide that to us?
We'll get back to you in writing on that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lupian.
Yeah, building off of Vice President Harris's questions around gentrification, Council approved a vacancy survey, 2 years ago now. When do we anticipate hiring a vendor to do that survey?
I'll have to get back to you in writing on that. I don't have an answer on that unless a member of our team has that ready to go. Hearing none, we'll get back to you.
That'd be great. What are the key equity outcomes that are tracked annually, such as homeownership rate, lead exposure, code compliance, vacancy, and blight?
Well, you can see in our KPIs some of what we're tracking, and that's really, I think, what we want to focus on as our outcomes. I think a lot of the data around equity outcomes can be derived from a variety of sources that maybe aren't as easy to track as some of the work that we're doing. So relying on census data, right, that looks at the community as a whole and can help to lead us to see are our investments being impactful. Important to keep in mind that census estimates are estimates, right? They're based on limited information and then extrapolated. So the downside of that, right, is that the decennial census is the best data available and only comes every 10 years. So, but where we can, like the new housing market study will have a lot of information. I think be very helpful for some of the questions that you've got.
Thank you. You mentioned the vacant property registry. I struggle to understand the voluntary nature of it. If we know where the properties are, why can't we register them?
Well, we know where they are, right, and we enforce on them, right. We enforce the code on them. We're ticketing, and we're holding them accountable. By getting them voluntarily registered, I think the top benefit, one, they don't get necessarily fined in the same way, but also they get that insurance, right? And that's really that's the key driver for us, right? It's about protecting our interests. We just talked about the number of demolitions, right?
So it's less about enforcement, more about making sure the properties are insured.
Keeping them safe for the public, right? So if they're insured, they're more likely to be cared for, and they're more likely then to be something that if something were to happen, at that property, it's not coming at the expense of the city taxpayers.
Got it. I wondered if you could provide an update on the cobblestone house.
Yeah, we are in the process of putting together a request for proposals through the land bank to reach out to. We've had some interested parties that have that we've talked to, and we want to get that out and see if we can make a connection with a builder, a developer that's willing to put in the investment needed to turn this around, preserve that building, and put it back to productive use.
Is this the first RFP that's gone out for the property?
Yeah,
it
it would
is.
be.
Oh, wow. Okay. I had a question around the KPIs being removed around neighborhood cleanups and NSC staff attendance at association meetings. Does that mean that that is less of a priority?
Wouldn't say that it identifies less of a priority, just maybe not as impactful of a measure, right? So trying to replace those with things that have more meaning.
So there's no change in policy around that.
No, and it's like that's what you're supposed to do. It's like the father that tells me, that comes in and says, "I pay for my child." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're supposed to do that." So we see that as part of the job. So,
okay.
It should just be happening.
Great. Thanks.
Zoning and permitting or neighborhood preservation, open to anyone. Councilmember Monroe.
On page 16, there's a KPI for commercial corridor reviews, and I'm wondering what those consist of.
Thank you. I'll actually ask Erica to respond to you on that one.
Good afternoon. Yes, so in our commercial corridor reviews, we are looking for standard markers of health vibrancy code, right? So we're looking at storefronts, homes, to see if there are issues with blight, code, maybe trash and debris in the right-of-way, as well as working with business operators to build rapport and engagement.
So does the street manager have a role in this?
In the sense of the reviews, no, not a direct role, though they often are in the corridors for the scope of their role within economic development.
Would you provide in writing what the role of the street manager is and what the measurements are of success?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And additionally, there's one here for individuals that graduate from the city's community university program. Do we have any follow-up information that shows us where those graduates may have plugged into existing organizations or possibly started their own, block group or anything else?
We could get that for you.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Zoning and permitting. Couple questions. First, I really appreciate the KPI of developing a new. I'm going to get there, Councilmember. Developing a new customer experience strategy for the permit office based on recent experience with expanded hours and online appointment scheduling. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that might entail?
Yeah, I'll call on Matt Simonis to respond to that one.
Yes, thank you, Council Member, for the question. So as was discussed early on in this budget hearing, there was a reorganization or realignment last year which reintroduced, I should say, the permit office coordinator position. And so since that time, Kale, who is sitting behind me in that position, has been working to expand the mayor's desire to have expanded hours, and we've done that through scheduling for more, one-on-one time as opposed to someone that's just coming in and has all their documents and needs a permit for a fence or a deck or something that can be issued quickly. So this strategic initiative was developed to use all of the data that we're currently collecting as part of both the scheduling and the non-scheduling component. We're tracking the number of people coming in, how long they're waiting while they're here, and our plan is to use that for future planning to ensure that the building permit office is serving residents, applicants, et cetera, in a manner which is consistent with 2026, 2027.
So we're going to be increasing the availability of the permit counter, but not necessarily through open hours. There'll be one-on-one appointments and a whole bunch of online appointments and a whole bunch of different options. You're planning it this year, but you won't implement it this year.
That has already occurred. What you just described has already occurred, where people can make appointments to come in, or they can come in still on walk-in days. This initiative is more about what do we need to change, if anything? Is it something physical in the office? Is it changing the hours? And we're going to use the information or the data that we've collected about the number of people coming in, when they're coming in, and that sort of thing.
Thanks. Last question on this section for me is just about with ZAP being approved sometime this upcoming fiscal year, are there I'm assuming you do have concerns about staff capacity and the huge number of questions that are going to come in your way. There's no increase in staff. There's only a small decrease to a part-time clerical position. Obviously, not an easy year to add positions, but what are you going to do to handle the increased strain?
Yeah, it's a great question. The one staff change within the Division of Zoning is there is an increase from a senior zoning analyst to an associate zoning analyst, and one of the main goals in that will be, among other things, to assist with ZAP transition. And ZAP transition, as you indicated, means a lot of things. It means training the land use boards. It means getting training and training the staff. It's going to be an increased level of questions. And so with this budget, what we were able to do with the constraints that are, of course, before us is still provide for not necessarily additional staff, but an increase in a position, because the expectation is going to be that there will be a significant amount of work forthcoming.
Thanks. Councilmember Smith, followed by President Melendez.
Thank you. I think I'm in the right section. I'm sure Councilmember Gruber will correct me if I'm not. So I wanted to ask, how are neighborhoods prioritized for housing investment, code enforcement, demolition, rehabilitation, and economic development? And what data is being used to determine which communities receive resources first? If you want to get back to me and write.
So yeah, I'm happy to provide some more information in writing, but I would say we don't necessarily prioritize neighborhoods over one another for investment, right? We're looking to support investment citywide, but also with a balanced approach. That means not only downtown and in the neighborhoods, but among our neighborhoods, to make sure that investments are being felt citywide.
But I think I'll use examples. I'll give you some examples on how we prioritize neighborhoods that have disproportionately been left out, left behind, and forgotten about. So with our tree initiative, where we wanted to plant 6,000 trees within a period of 4 years, we prioritized neighborhoods where the tree canopy was had an F grade or worse. So that ended up being most of the area in the Northeast. With the water line replacement program that's not in this budget, we prioritized neighborhoods that had been that had high instances of lead and that were seeing disinvestment. That ended up being a lot of the areas in the Northwest, Northeast, and Southwest. And then for by the block, where you see a lot of the home ownership, those are neighborhoods that were redlined. So we prioritized those areas for areas that were redlined, Thomas Street, and then in the Southwest. So that's how we prioritize the housing for those areas. I will say that one of the things that concerns me is that a lot of the affordable housing disproportionately falls in areas that many would consider our challenged neighborhoods. I don't think that's fair. I think affordable housing should be countywide as well as equally distributed across the city. But we get a lot of pushback when we raise those conversations. So disproportionately, you will see a lot of affordable housing in some of our neighborhoods that were challenged, which is good. We'll take it. We want it. We want more. We want more affordable housing in the Northeast, and that's where most of it has been built per capita. The largest number has been built probably in the last 5 years, 5-6 years in in the Northeast. But that's what we look at. We look at the historical factors, but while at the same time taking a balanced approach to make sure that we do it all across the city. But when it came to lead pipe replacement, when it came to new home ownership build, and when it came to environmental factors such as our tree canopy expansion, we prioritized areas that were traditionally redlined, left behind, and that have seen large efforts of this investment going back to at least 1960.
Thank you. I'm thinking about, for example, my godparents have been on Coleman for over 6 years. Ain't nobody in line to buy a house on Coleman Street, right? But when I think about aging in place and I think about some of our elders, I'm concerned about, not to say that we don't have resources, but what access to those resources look like, or how do they access those resources. I'm not sure if we have a booklet of some kind or something that we can share, but a lot of the older people in these communities have been asking me about, supports for their roof or, things like that. So I think having an education and awareness campaign, and particularly for some of our elder community members, would be very helpful in helping them to maintain the homes that they have, and in particularly communities where we see a lot of transient individuals. I think anything we can do to keep those people in place and support them in keeping their homes and helping to stabilize the community would be helpful. Just something to keep in mind.
Yep, and that's critical for neighborhood stabilization. We want people to be able to age in place, and then more importantly, one of the things we've talked about is how do you make sure you set up a program where after they want to pass on their house, that they're able to pass it on to a family member, so that way it stays in home, it stays as a owner occupied home and continues to stabilize the neighborhood. Next month, you'll be asked to vote on a lot of the CDBG dollars, which some of that supports home ownership opportunities for seniors, particularly the roof repair programs, as well as some of our housing improvement grant that is geared towards a lot of our seniors. And we can pull out some of the stuff that's on the website and put that in paper form, so that way that can be distributed to those folks. The NSCs are a lot of the first place stops that people go to in the neighborhoods to get information to apply for the roof repair programs and some of the other items that you mentioned. Those are particularly important for our seniors who are on a fixed income, because that allows them, number one, to maintain their insurance, but also maintain the equity that's in their home. If they can't take care of their roof or some of the windows and some of the other things, they lose that equity. They could lose that property that they worked on so hard to get, and that's why we prioritize a lot of seniors. It's just not for seniors; it's for a lot of folk. But there is a carve out for seniors because we understand how important aging in place for those programs.
Yeah, and I'll just the mayor's talking about CDBG reminded me also, just to it relates to your initial question, is some of our funds, right, are required to be spent in what we call LMI or low mod income areas, right? So small business grants, for instance, right, have to be on generally on those LMI corridors or otherwise benefit the LMI neighborhood. So it's another example of the work that we do and how that gets distributed across the city.
President Melendez.
Thank you. Neighborhood service centers. Looking at page 16 and appropriation by activity. Couldn't help but notice the difference in funding between the four quadrants of the city. The southeast quad, which happens to probably from a socioeconomic standpoint have the least challenges, has the largest budget by over $100,000. And if you look at the Northwest and the Northeast, they have the smallest budget and considerably most of the neighborhood service center related challenges. From my perspective, I'm one person up here, but I just wonder what goes into the variance between the four quadrants of the city.
Absolutely, thank you. You mentioned that the Northeast and Northwest have smaller budgets. The Southeast and Southwest have larger ones, and that is directly related. First off, to that those two, the southeast and the southwest are in rented space versus the northeast and the northwest, which are in city-owned spaces. So they have to have those the rent costs factored into their particular budgets. And then with respect to the southeast, the rent cost, which was before you, I believe, this past month,
last month,
is increasing, and that's reflective in that. And there's also variations in personnel costs, not in the number of personnel, but in personnel costs.
Longevity of staff that have been here longer, kind of thing.
Exactly, positions within their brackets, and in the southeast, the community program planner, the NIA staff is proposed for an upgrade because they are supervising the other NIA staff. So they are located in the southeast, but their work is taking them across the city. So that's also explaining some of that variation.
Just strictly real estate and the cost that it's costing for the building. It's not a reflection of what each NSC.
Yeah, that's helpful. It just sticks out when you look at it. So I think the lesson here, though, is also about municipal buildings. And I know that we've talked about in the past looking at, and Laura Street's been shelved for a long time, but the potential of us having co-location models for municipal buildings in the southeast, as well as at one point we were talking the northwest as well. Any progress on whether or not I know that we have leases now, we're locked into certain circumstances, but any progress on municipal buildings?
Yeah, we still have, I still have grand goals and grand ideas about some of this stuff. The problem is just the cost. I think I talked about at another budget hearing what some of my goal was, particularly like in the Northwest, to build new, it's just a matter of what our costs are right now and what we're able to do. Ideally, what we would love to have is to have somebody build us new NSCs, make it multi-purpose, and then lease it back, and then maybe either lease it back to us at a cost, or us being able to have our own, building. But that's harder. That's easier said than done. So right now the leasing has just made the sense. But ideally, it would be good for us to have a long-term lease and a permanent home that is modern, with a predictable price that's over a longer period of time. But finding someone to be able to do that has not been easy. In fact, even when we talked about the Laura Street, that was a challenge. All right, I gotta take it.
Great. That's it for this section. I have something in code enforcement. I'll wait.
Councilor Martin.
On page 16, there are two key performance indicators that are no longer in existence this year. The Neighborhood and Business Association meetings attended by NSC staff and the rehab intakes. Can you explain why you've decided to remove those?
Yeah, so this gets back a bit to what we mentioned earlier about focusing on meaningful KPIs, but also with respect to the rehab intakes, that those are being centralized at the here at City Hall, and so that no longer is a function that would be provided out of the NS.
And would Neighborhood and Business Association staff still attend meetings? Sorry, would NSC staff still attend Neighborhood and Business Association?
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. It's definitely a core function to maintain that connectivity and relationship with local neighborhood and business associations.
So how would you now measure that participation or see the change over time?
Well, we'll continue to keep track of what our staff are doing, but in terms of it being a meaningful KPI, right? We felt that wasn't really telling the story in the way that that we're seeking to do. But absolutely, we'll be keeping track, making sure that we're in attendance at meetings, and that we're present and engaged.
Great, thank you. And last question, I think this may be in a previous section, but have you had a chance to audit the process for people applying for rehab grants or any roof repairs and consider, the ease of access, what barriers may exist? Where is that at? Because we get some feedback, and I've heard the process is not so straightforward.
Yeah, we're always looking to make process improvements, and one of those things is centralizing that intake process, right? The various programs that we have requires somebody who really knows and is able to explain to all residents who come in asking questions, right? So with turnover from having part-time staff, hard to keep people in those positions, and as well as the consistency across the quadrants. Bringing things in and centralizing it gives us one person who is well versed in all of the programs and all of the requirements, and make sure that as residents are getting that information, they're receiving the best information.
Thank you. And how do residents give you all feedback after they've won a grant and go through that process? How do you know what their experience has been?
Well, we know that folks are very thrilled when they receive their rehab grants. That is sure. Do we?
Yeah, I guess, of course. But after they receive it, a lot of things happen, right? So when the project is marked complete, right, what is that feedback like about their interactions with staff, about what they've received?
So overall, the interaction or the reaction that we get from city residents when a project is completed is pretty positive in terms of the process. And to your point, as far as after, it may be a year, 2 years later when stuff start happening, then we have those back and forth as well with residents. As times, there's times when there are things that are part of the contract that got finished by the contractor. Basically, what I'm saying that there are times where property owners take on other work that's not part of the contract to property rehab, and then that causes issue. If that answers your question.
Yeah. I guess in this next year, is there a way to implement some mechanism for feedback and follow up after the project is done, even 6 months after, something council can review and get a sense of what's going on?
Yeah, we can do some surveys.
Thank you.
I believe we already do provide surveys, so we'd be happy to provide information in writing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Monroe.
How do you distribute the rehab grants? As in, how do you make the selections for who gets them?
I'm going to defer to Johanna Santiago. She can better explain.
So for the rehab grants, there's a criteria. They have to meet income guidelines. They have to make sure that they don't have code violations on other properties that they own. That they're up to date with their taxes and not in mortgage or tax foreclosure.
And is there any geographic component to the choice?
At this time, we don't have a geographic location.
Could I have the numbers, the rehab grants for fiscal year 26 divided by quadrant?
Sure.
Thank you. I also have a couple more questions here. With the new state law, are owner occupants of doubles, are those units now subject to a C of O?
Yes.
And is the interior of both spaces reviewed, or simply the one that doesn't belong to a family member?
Both.
And that's because of the state?
Yep. You're referencing PHL 1377.
Okay. And then that's the same one. It added that, increased the frequency of C of Os from 5 to 3 years? And then did it also lower the lead hazard, the number for the lead dust wipes?
Correct.
Okay.
So we went from 6 years for properties that are located within the lead paint high risk area, for 3 years, and then also other EPA numbers that also went.
But we still do have the target area, or are we doing this the same citywide now with the dust wipes?
The lead paint high risk area is where THL 1377 applies, but we still continue our program throughout the city.
Okay, so is it the same, us making the choice for the doubles then to apply it outside of the high risk area?
So this,
or is that separate?
That's separate.
Okay. I've definitely heard from people with the doubles and now being subjected to the C of O, not being happy about that. That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Okay, we're open to all sections of NBD now, and we'll just go down the line for any last questions people have. Council Vice President, you want to start? Councilmember Leslie Smith? Councilmember Lupien? President Melendez?
Yes, thank you. Just a question about a position change or addition. Let me get to the right section. Sorry about that. Got to be quick. So there was an addition in code enforcement for customer service coordinator. Could you describe what that position will do?
Yes, so that person will be, we had an on-call code enforcement officer that oversees our conveyance permit. That individual will also take on that. Also a certified New York State code enforcement officer, but not necessarily performing code enforcement.
Got it. So customer facing?
Correct.
Got it. And then with respect to, and this is probably going to be a CIP question, but I'm going to ask it here. Equipment for code enforcement in the field. Are we making any changes there?
Yes. We're currently testing a number of devices.
Still working through the process.
Still working through the process.
Got it. I'll reserve additional questions or I'll put them in writing. Thank you.
Councilmember Martin?
On page 20, for the number 8, properties made compliant through the court process. Can you describe what this means?
We're going to ask Ann Wallace, our manager at Code Enforcement, to explain that API.
Hi. So that means either the property was sold through the court process or from start to finish of a case being open with code violations. Through that process in court, that case has been solidified and all violations have been completed and the certificate of occupancy has been approved.
Amazing. Thank you. And do you work with the housing attorney usually?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Great. Thank you. And one last question. The number 12, still on page 20, the customer satisfaction rate for the C of O process. How do you measure that?
Yeah. Likewise to the other, and most of ours, they're through surveys that are provided to customers.
Thank you. And you can provide more details with that in writing. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any further questions, Councilmember Monroe?
As a follow-up to the C of O process, the median length of time is 200 days. Why is that? It seems long.
I'll have Ann answer that as well. Historically, we were like 110 days, but Ann a little bit more than that.
So In recent years, it was about 9 months from start to finish of the C of O process. We do have folks who complete a C of O in a smaller time frame, but we do have folks who are more of the mom and pop who own a property who may not have all of the means to do it as quickly as other entities that own properties.
So that must be a fair number of them, since the 200 is a median.
And it does also come with the factor of the time of year. So if someone starts their C of O in October and they need to paint and do exterior code violations, it may be a weather deferred violation also.
What do you do when somebody complains because they were given the list of things they had to correct for their C of O, and then a different inspector comes through and then adds something else to the list? How do you deal with that?
So basically, the first step is to look at the case, look to see what happened on the initial inspection. Sometimes there are areas of the property that we were not able to gain access to. Most of the time, that is when additional violations are added due to the fact that there may have been a bedroom that they were housing their dogs in, and we weren't able to get into that bedroom that day. So when the next inspector goes out, they're able to go in there and they see smoke detector is missing. So a health and safety violation is always going to be super important to be added to a case to have it rectified in order to complete the C of O process.
And so if it is an exterior violation that the first code inspector did not catch, when the other inspector comes through, they can just add that and then...
So for the most part, it should be a conversation with the owner. It could have happened overnight. It could have been a gutter that fell due to ice damming. So it wasn't originally there during the first inspection. So we do also extend the hand of having a conversation if it wasn't on the initial list. But if it's a health and safety, that inspector should be speaking with their senior to ensure it's okay to add it to the list with a reason why and an explanation to the owner, this is why it needs to be added.
And how are we dealing with those known entities that are slumlords and have, a large number of open case violations across the city with their portfolio? Are we doing anything specific for those individuals?
So right now in city court, what we have done with the housing attorney, we have identified some of those groups. We currently have a few different landlords who are in city court with 15 to 16 properties with open code violations. So that was something that the housing attorney really started to delve into, because we're seeing, okay, their property on Harris Street is great, but their 3 properties on J, Mount Reed, Genesee Street are horrible. So we're taking them more in batches instead of just a property at a time.
Great. Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Patterson.
Okay, so I'm writing the email too, so don't worry about it. You'll get it all in writing. Roofing lottery. Historically, we have distributed funding for roofing repair programs through a roofing lottery. We've also had a segmented section out for seniors, and if memory serves me correctly, we also kind of had it segmented out by quadrant. What has changed, or has anything changed?
At this time, there have been no changes
to
the program.
Cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith. I have 2 last questions, and then I'll give anyone. If people have one last question, feel free to throw it in there. In code enforcement, there's 2 vacant full-time positions that are being eliminated due to budget constraints on page 21. I'm glad to hear the new customer service position, but I would have guessed that code enforcement would have not been a place that we saw any eliminations just due to the needs. So can you talk through that and what the impact's going to be on overall caseload?
So we had a few positions that we were calling.
Can you be a little closer into the mic?
Oops, sorry. A few positions that we had that were we call them floaters. So we had a number of vacancies for, and again, like the mayor stated, those are the positions that we eliminated first because they've been vacant for some time now. So in terms of the operation, we still have the 7, 8, 8 across our 4 quadrant.
How many officers total?
40.
33. We have 33.
33 code enforcement officers fully trained, ready to roll. We're done with the kind of very, very long onboarding process for some of those new positions. Just losing 2 floating positions, which were helpful, but in your mind, not mandatory to get the work done.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, this is less of a question, more of a comment. Just in terms of the neighborhood service centers, I wasn't shy in some of the meetings that we had about my disappointment in the outcomes of the study that was commissioned. I think the study that we asked for a couple years ago posed some questions, and the study came back essentially reiterating the importance of getting answers to those questions, but not actually answering them. I'm really heartened to see the KPI on page 16 develop standardized operating procedures with key partners to create a streamlined NSC service framework that strengthens coordination, efficiency, and accountability citywide. That very much feels like what the study was meant to do. So I'm curious, can you just give a snapshot of the process to do that work?
That work is already well underway, that Erica is leading and working with the NSC staff and the code staff that engage with the NSCs on a regular basis. Erica, if you want to.
Absolutely. Yeah, so in addition to our internal partners, right, our own teams and our code partners, we've also requested a liaison from each of our other departments citywide, especially our key collaborators, so that we can work together and have started working together for our key joint collaborative processes. What are our SOPs? What are our best practices? And ensuring that not only are we in the same page, but going back to the theme we've discussed today, that we're approaching it uniformly across the quads.
It's really exciting to hear. Thank you for that. And please keep us posted as the work progresses.
Absolutely.
Any last questions from council members? Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, Deputy Mayor, and we'll see that concludes the business of the BFG committee, and we will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Thank you.